Welcome to RX, How I Got There. I am your host, Ebere Iboko. In this podcast, we profile and tell the stories of pharmacists and others doing interesting and inspiring things with their careers, with the hopes of showcasing the different opportunities within pharmacy. If you're a student or a pharmacy professional, this podcast will help to broaden your career aspirations and your worldview. Our guest today is Patrick Kurunwune, who is a senior healthcare consultant at Deloitte. He has a PharmD and an MBA. In today's episode, we will learn a lot about Patrick's experience and the exciting life of a pharmacist working as a healthcare consultant. Hi, and welcome to RX, How I Got There. Today, I will be speaking to Mr. Patrick Kurunwune, who is a senior consultant with Deloitte. Patrick is also a pharmacist who does not dispense medicines to patients, but still impacts patients' access to medicines at a macro level and in a very important way. I am looking forward to hearing more about Patrick's career and about his current position, what he does, the details of what he does every day. I'm curious as to why he chose this path instead of the more traditional community pharmacy, hospital, or other practice settings. I hope that by speaking to Patrick, anyone who is listening will be able to appreciate the different things the pharmacists could do with their skill sets. So join me and let's listen to Patrick. Thank you. Okay, so hi, Patrick, and welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Great, thank you. So this is a discussion on RX, How I Got There, and I would like to invite you to start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background. I'm really looking forward to learning about you and about what you do. So do you mind telling us?
Absolutely, yeah. My name is Patrick Kurunwune. I am located here in Houston, Texas. I originally went to Duke University for undergrad when I turned 18 and got my undergrad there. And once I graduated, I always knew I wanted to do something in healthcare. I wasn't necessarily too sure where. And my mother's actually the one who pushed me in the direction towards pharmacy. So after I spent a couple of years doing the postgrad, I went ahead and attended the University of North Carolina, where I received my PharmD and my MBA. And at that time, that's when I actually realized during that duration of time when I was in school, and I think that's when we met as well around that same time, because your nephew, Patu, Richie, and them, those are my really good friends. So shout out to those guys. So during my time at UNC, part of your education requires you to go and have these mini rotations, right? So
to have what?
You have many rotations. So
rotations. Okay.
Essentially, you would go in and you would have a 4 to 6 week rotation period where you get to see what it's like to work as a pharmacist in your more traditional settings, right? So that includes hospital pharmacy, community pharmacy, and a little bit of ambulatory care pharmacy.
A little bit of what?
Ambulatory care. So
ambulatory care. Okay.
Ambulatory care. So like your outpatient type clinics that have pharmacists in them. I'll be honest with you. After my first year, I realized, wait, I don't think my calling was to be direct patient care, right by the patient's bedside, dealing with patients on individual level. And that's what really spurred me to want to go and get my MBA. And while I was doing that dual degree program, I realized there's so many other opportunities out there that a pharmacist can work in outside of what we call traditional pharmacy, right? So hospital and the community setting. So that's how I was actually introduced into consulting. And it's been a wrap ever since. So as soon as I graduated, I had an offer to go to Deloitte and do healthcare consulting for them. And I've been in that role ever since.
So healthcare consulting at Deloitte, what does it entail?
That's a good question. So the way I like to explain it, I think of consulting as one of our non-traditional pathways. So if you compare it to the health systems, community pharmacy, et cetera, think of health system and community pharmacy, that direct patient care. Think of that as like micro scale helping with patients, right? You're helping the patients on a micro scale level, direct patient care, one-on-one interactions. Think of healthcare consulting. Think of that more of macro scale solving problems. You're not necessarily helping patients anymore. You're now so helping populations of people. So what does that work actually look like on a day-to-day basis? Large Fortune 100 companies. So think of your Humanas, CVS, Walgreens, J&J, Eli Lilly, et cetera. These large companies come to companies like Deloitte and tell them, look, we have these large issues that we're trying to solve. A lot of them are entangled with our actual strategy of how we want to, drive forward and do better for our populations we serve. So we want you guys to bring your experts to come in and provide us with a third layer or third party aspect of what's going to be best for us from strategic endeavor. Essentially, I help large corporations think through different strategies that's going to help their overall, not just their bottom line, but their overall impact on the patient populations they serve.
So when you mentioned these large companies, I noted that some of them you mentioned are pharmaceutical manufacturing companies. Some of them are managed healthcare companies. Some are CVS, which also own retail pharmacy stores. So one would imagine that their consulting questions are different.
Absolutely.
So is your work specialized to some types of corporations, or could you on any given day be working on a project with GSK or Kaiser or CVS?
So it's a little bit of both, right? I think it's a little bit of both. What I will say is from a specialization point of view, I am choosing to work only on projects that are either healthcare or life science related. So that could be anything under the sun, right? That could be, how do we improve the brand of this drug? How do we improve the patient experience with this medication? How do we make sure that we're enabling provider groups to increase their star ratings by empowering the pharmacists that work internally for this company, right? How do we make sure that we're relieving the stress of pharmacists at a CVS or Walgreens by making sure that the pharmacy technicians are practically top of their license? So I say it kind of depends, because from a specialization standpoint that you talked about, I am focusing, yes, on healthcare and life sciences, but as far as the client and what the ask can be, it's anything under the sun. I think the best way to describe it, if the company usually brings us on because they have one of two agendas. Either one, they want a third party to accept what it is that they think is believable, and they need help proving that to a different business function. So they call us in to vet what they've done. Essentially, we're just verifying what they've done already. But in most instances, they're bringing us in because they may not have the internal bandwidth or capabilities to actually answer the questions that they're trying to get to. So they bring us in as a third party consultant that's able to be that extra addition and thought partner to them that enables them to deliver forward on their strategy.
Okay. From what I hear, which I can relate to from my pharmaceutical industry experience, sometimes your client could bring you in to validate either an insight they have or a decision they want to take, but need to sell to upper management or some other internal stakeholder. So you are the external validation they need for important decisions.
Absolutely. And go ahead.
No, please.
I was gonna say, yeah, and sometimes that's necessary, right? Sometimes, there is an answer that is clear cut and it makes sense. However, leadership, because they're not as close to that problem or that main concern, they need to hear it from somebody who isn't internal to the actual company. Hence where our company comes in, and we provide value in that way too. Like we will take a look at what they have done. We will make sure that we're vetting it and making sure that there aren't any false positives, anything that's going to, not pass the fact test. But even in those kind of endeavors, there is still a level of expertise we have to bring to the table just to make sure that we are in alignment with that internal party before we go and launch something new or present something to senior level leadership.
So it sounds interesting because you work on different projects from time to time. Yeah. Are there any downsides to your experience so far?
Yeah, I think in anything you do, there's always going to be pros and cons. I think what makes us stay in certain areas, or in sometimes leave certain areas, I think for me, the pros always have to outweigh the cons, right? I think for me, I've talked through some of those pros already, but having a larger scale impact, having autonomy in work, being able to see different areas of the healthcare industry, getting to work with different stakeholders at the C-suite level, those are all definitely pros, right? At top of the line, I think salary also compared to more of your traditional roles, that's definitely one of the pros. Think about some of the cons. Depending on who your client is, not all clients are going to be nice and easy to work with and kind and tender. Sometimes you will have those finicky clients, those clients that don't necessarily know what they want, right? They turn to swirl a lot when it comes to decision making. They have a hard time driving forth on a solution. So I definitely say the client, if you have a tough client, that can definitely be a con. Sometimes, and again, this is all stemming from the client interaction. Sometimes you have a project that's going to require longer hours, right? I've been on projects where, I may be doing 45, 50 hours a week, right? That's not that bad. That's a typical 9 to 5, give or take, in corporate America. There's some projects I've been on where I've logged 60, 65 hours, right? That's not fun. That's not fun. So sometimes there's long hours that are built in that come to the territory. And usually if you have a bad client, that usually sours the entire experience. But for me, those would be the two big buckets of areas where I say, look, you need to make sure that your understanding of these two areas, because it's very possible that you will run into some of those roadblocks at some point in your consulting career.
Was your pharmacist license a requirement for this position, or is it an added value?
Absolutely not a requirement at all. And I will say that I think in the long term, the PharmD will supplement my career, but by no means is it a requirement to do the work that I'm doing, not at all. If anything, you have to remember the work we do as consultants, it's client-facing work, right? So whenever we give our resumes to these clients, they want to make sure that they're paying top dollar for our contribution. They want to make sure that it's reputable people who they're paying these large bucks for. So having the PharmD, it looks good on your resume. It looks good that, look, this person has the ability to be a drug expert or a drug or medication manager on this team. But that being said, it's not a requirement or something that's needed for you to, be able to play in this space.
I can certainly relate to that. In my career with the pharmaceutical industry, I've never held a position where, well, maybe except once, and it was actually when I was back in Nigeria. But for most of my career in the US and China, my pharmacy background, my pharmacy training was never a requirement. And at some times, I assumed, I took it for granted. But when I look back, I think that it was very valuable because there were certain things I knew that I didn't even think about how I knew it. So when I shifted from one therapy area to another, as is often the case, I didn't have to learn from the start, but my colleagues who had engineering backgrounds or non-healthcare background would often have to spend the first 3 months of every new job just learning the science of whatever medicine they were working on. So I don't know if you can relate to that.
Yeah, so I would say that in the consulting realm, while there definitely is, so I don't want to make it sound like there's no benefit. There's absolutely a benefit to having that Pharm behind your name. There are going to be things, to your point, there are certain things that, you know, I just take it as second nature because it's part of my training, where some of my colleagues, you know, they're impressed that, you know, I have a sense of, you know, what class of drug Jardiance is and who the competitors are. I know that because it's close to me, something I've been working on because I've been in pharmacy school. But I guess to your point, it is very possible that we take those things for granted. I will say though that, and this is my opinion, I do believe that these more non-traditional pathways, right? It's consulting, commercial side of being the drug manufacturers, the tech space, the finance space, these areas where they're starting to engage more with other healthcare players, the pharmacy profession should definitely take notice and try their best to input more of our individuals into these non-traditional pathways. I think there's more upside. I think there's more benefit. I think the overall value and perks you get in working with these non-traditional pathways are better than what you get in the hospital as well as in a community setting. I have to make sure I'm being understood when I say that. I'm not advocating that we turn our backs to the individuals who have a calling to be in direct patient care. I'm not saying that at all. I do believe we need individuals who are in direct patient care because that's our foundation as medication experts. However, there's also added value in us being able to diversify our talent pool and make sure we have individuals who go into these non-traditional pathways. Because at the end of the day, the decision makers who are really making those decisions is going to help us expand our capabilities and practice at the top of our license. You need to be on the business side of healthcare. You need to be on the business side of these activities. The individuals who have the ability to talk with these C-suite executives, that's where the change is coming from. That's where the change is coming from.
So if I can break down what you're saying, that looking at the trend, the power base, the direction of healthcare in general, the pharmacy profession and pharmacists should be encouraged to explore these non-traditional roles that address patient needs and access to medicine at a macro level, like the one you do, consulting. I actually think that lots of people are interested. Yes, they may not feel prepared and well equipped, but because I was one of those who took the non-traditional pharmacy track, I do get inquiry from people who want to know, how do you get into the pharmaceutical industry, especially on the commercial side? Because many of us are in R&D or pharmacoeconomics, but not necessarily product marketing, which is how I started my industry career. So what would you say to a pharmacy student who is in their senior year or final year, as we call it in Nigeria, or a recent pharmacy graduate who wants to explore the non-traditional pharmacy roles, such as consulting? Is there something they should be doing even at the stage they are to be prepared, or what you'd advise them to do to make themselves more attractive?
I want to unpack that question because I think there's a couple of teaching points to students and the question you asked. I think it's a really good question. I want to make sure I answer it. The first part of that question was related to the individuals who are in their senior year. I would argue it's never too late, but they can always start early. Okay, and here's what that means. I think too many times pharmacy students put the onus on their pharmacy administration to guide them and lead them and share with them, here are the opportunities present to you. And this is not a knock against pharmacy administration. I don't think they're well equipped to do that. At the end of the day, I'm somebody who is very much, I feel like I'm in line with reality and what the truth of situations are. As somebody who's gone through a pharmacy program, and I'm sure you can attest as well, a pharmacy administration program, it's their job is to put pharmacy students in those pharmacy seats. And once they graduate, it's musical chairs for them. As long as they put somebody in a program, whether it's a residency, fellowship, community, as long as they get that 100% number where we put people in jobs, they don't care about, what that looks like at the end, right? So while that could be a strategic differentiator for pharmacy schools, having an admin that actually cares and has a good understanding of what those other avenues are, that's not the reality of the situation. So it's on the pharmacy students to start their first year in school, their second year, first, second year, wherever they feel comfortable, after they have a good sense of what pharmacy looks like. It's on them to, go out and, like you said, reach out to individuals, do some research, see what else or what other avenues pharmacists are working in that's not all that they give you, which is hospital and community, and sometimes med affairs, like you were saying, right? So as to answer your question, as to the senior or the pharmacy student who's a senior, I'd say don't wait till your senior year. Start year one, start year two, okay? For the individual who did wait till their senior year, I think the worst thing you can do is take 2 years of your life doing a residency or fellowship because you need more time to figure out what you want to do. That's a waste of time. It's a waste of your income potential. You're taking a third of your salary for 2 years because you're trying to figure out what you want to do. That's terrible. That's terrible. I would recommend for that individual, go and find a pharmacy job, whatever that case may be. Do not go into a residency fellowship if you don't have a passion for it, right? Go find a pharmacy gig, pharmacy job. And in that interim, do your research then, right? I would argue school is the best time for you to do that research. Just wait till your last year. By no means are you behind or not gonna be able to make it. You have time. It doesn't take a lot of time to do research and figure out what are some other avenues that pharmacists can play, okay? Now, the last part of your question, speaking to those individuals who are full-time pharmacists in jobs already who want to transition, I think for these individuals, I would highly recommend that they follow the same pathway that the new graduate is following, right? If you don't know what is out there and you're just curious, it doesn't hurt to go on a LinkedIn, do a quick Google search and see where are pharmacists working in that are not non-traditional, right? And you will be surprised what you'll see. You'll see people in consulting. You'll see pharmacists in finance. You'll see pharmacists in tech. You'll see them in communication. You'll see them in manufacturing. You'll see them across the board. And I think from there, it's a game of just being tenacious and being unwilling to stop or to take no for an answer, right? People are willing to talk to you if they see that you're willing to put in the effort to reach out and ask, right? It doesn't hurt anybody to go on LinkedIn and ask them, hey, I'm pretty interested in this field you're in. I also have a PharmD. I'm curious to see how you got in that field, right? I have multiple people who ping me, and it's funny that, and it's trying to say this, I graduated 2 years ago, and some of those individuals, they're my classmates from 2 years ago who are now finishing their residency saying, this is not for me. And I think for me, the humbling piece of that is I didn't allow myself to get sucked up by the narrative of pharmacy, either hospital or community or fellowship, or there's nothing else. I didn't let myself get stuck in that mentality. And now when I have individuals reach out, I embrace them with open arms because I know the benefit of having different types or having diversity of individuals across our profession and other industries, right? I will say the point you just made about, fourth years or seniors having that opportunity to see what else is out there. The lack of that occurring here in the States and our different schools is the reason why I actually created my startup called Pharm Mentors. And essentially, that is a company that does two things. One, it provides fourth-year pharmacy students or senior pharmacy students with post-grad tools to help them be better candidates, right? So resume reviews, cover letter reviews, practice interviews, case interviews, etc. So that's one work stream. Another work stream or vertical that we have, and this was one that we started, took us a year or so to build. We just rolled it out this past November of 2021. It's called Pharmacists and Consulting. Essentially, it's a 1-month experiential rotation program where a fourth-year pharm student can come in. If one of their elective rotations, they can come in and see what it's like to be in a simulated consulting environment where they'll, have to work with the team. They get to pitch to clients. They'll have to gather research. They will have a month-long experience and feel what it's like to actually be a pharmacist in consulting.
Could you repeat the name of the company?
Absolutely. It's called Pharm Mentors.
Pharm Mentors. That's excellent. By the way, you unpacked my question like an excellent consultant.
Structure.
Thank you.
One thing I always tell my mentees, it doesn't matter what profession you want to go into. I truly believe consulting provides everyone with structure, and not just the way they think, but also the way that they present their thoughts. Because at the end of the day, a lot of these companies, they're paying us top dollar, not so that we can tell them what to do on one slide in 3 different sentences. They're paying us to make sure we can package up a recommendation that is easily digestible and concise enough for them to see what the answer is very easily and simply.
Another thing about the pharmacy profession, and I'm curious to know how it is specific to consulting. It used to be, and I think it still is, that pharmacy was one of those professions you could exit and come back to the exact same spot you left, dispensing drugs in a store or maybe working in a hospital. And it worked for some people, but for some others, it could be frustrating because the career track was not very extensive in the traditional pharmacy roles. Mm-hmm. Could you speak a little bit to your appreciation or your knowledge of the career progression opportunities for pharmacists in the consulting sector?
I consider consulting a 2-year residency, just with better pay and better exit opportunities. That's what I tell my mentees when they ask me how does it compare to a residency or a fellowship, right? Residency fellowships, 2-year programs, 1/3 of your salary, pretty intense for the most part. And when you finish, you're hoping that there's room at that hospital or that you have connections at a different hospital to actually obtain a full-time job. In consulting, you get 100% of that salary. You're going to work it's going to be challenging, not just because the work is challenging but exciting, but also there is a learning curve associated with that, right? If you are a pharmacy student coming from a strict science background, you don't have a lot of business acumen or business knowledge, it may be challenging for you, and that learning curve makes that learning process a little bit more challenging. However, I will say at that 2-year mark, consulting has returned up or out. Essentially what that means is either you have performed well enough to get promoted to the next level, or the consulting firm will nicely usher you out and recommend that you try and go to other different career paths. With that being said, the reason why consulting is so competitive and very lucrative here in the States exit opportunities are amazing, and a lot of corporate companies enjoy the capabilities and skills that you learn as a consultant. And because of that, you are highly in demand and you're highly wanted, especially after you have that 2-year mark. I think this past year was a litmus test for that. There was heavy attrition across the board because people were getting, tired of, working from home because of COVID. If I could show you my LinkedIn inbox and show you the different types of opportunities that I've had, whether it's from small startups that are just getting off the ground, whether it's drug manufacturers who need individuals in the commercial space, whether it's health plans or PBMs who need direct or assistant director, manager type individuals. You have the full gamut of opportunities you want because you have that business acumen, business background, the consulting pedigree, but also that PharmD is an added layer of support that does aid in figuring out what that next opportunity may be.
So you mentioned the next level if one is successful and wishes to continue in-house. What is that next level? So you're a senior consultant. What would be the next level to a senior consultant?
So, and again, the terminology is going to be different from firm to firm. At Deloitte, we have analyst, consultant, senior consultant, manager, senior manager, partner, principal, or managing director. Okay. Now, I came in as a senior consultant because I attained employment to Deloitte through the business school. The business school, because you've done those 2 years of business administration, they expect you to have a stronger sense of business acumen. So you come in at the SC level of senior consultant. Most PharmDs who come straight out of school, unless they have tons of experience already, they will mostly start out as consultant. So for me, I am almost at the point where I'm at my 2-year mark. So I will see if I go up to manager. And once you start advancing in those levels, the responsibilities start to shift, right? If I could bucket the roles and responsibilities of a consultant into 3 of them, I would say it's technical, it's social, and it's political. Okay? When you're a analyst, consultant, senior consultant, you're really trying to maximize that technical bucket. You're in the weeds, you're doing the projects, you're building the PowerPoint decks, you're in Excel crunching numbers. You need to make sure your technical skills are on par so that you can make that jump and start getting into manager, which is the lowest end of the hierarchy when it comes to senior level leadership at these firms. When I think about the manager level, honestly, I think they make one of the most challenging areas, middle level management, because you have one foot with the junior resource and making sure that they're on track, making sure that the train stays on the tracks. You also have another foot in senior level leadership. You have to make sure that your leadership is fully aware of what's going on the actual project, right? So you have to wear 2 different hats, 2 different buckets that you're really focusing on. I think once you start getting past that manager level, that's where those other 2 buckets start to get flexed, the social and the political. At that point, you're more in charge of maintaining that client relationship, selling work to the clients, trying to figure out what the next opportunity is for the team to work on. So you're not necessarily building the decks or building the slides anymore. You're now providing subject matter level expertise over multiple projects and being a voice of reason while you're more focused on the social piece, the political piece.
Very interesting. If a pharmacist is seriously interested in consulting and wants to go to grad school, a number of people who talk to me think about going for a PhD. I would like to ask you, based on your experience with your MBA, would you suggest that they may be better off getting an MBA as a more attractive way of getting, not attractive, maybe an easier, if you will, or a better articulated entryway into consulting, or not?
And again, just to clarify, this is after they've received their MBA, correct?
This is what?
This is after they've received their Pharm, right? After they
Yes, this is a pharmacist who is thinking about grad school and or consulting.
I would say it depends. It depends on if that pharmacist has prior work experience. Do they have 3 to 5 years where they've worked in, it doesn't have to be a corporate setting, but have they worked in a, a employer type setting where they have experience they can actually speak about? The one thing that I'm torn about when I have mentees ask me if they should do the Pharm MBA program is it's hard for me to, encourage them to go down that path if they came to pharmacy school right out of undergrad, right? The only reason I did the Pharm MBA is because I did have a couple of years where I worked after I graduated from Duke. So I had some more experience to talk about. So the MBA is not a passage into getting into consulting, right? You can go into consulting right after pharmacy school. However, I will say the value of the MBA is if you have tangible work experience you can actually talk about and leverage during your time in business school. Business school is more so around sharing past experiences with other individuals and getting a better understanding of what it's like within those different environments. You don't add much value in it, or you don't get much from the business program if you don't have any tangible work experience to rely back on, right? So that question really does depend. For the individual who has a couple years of work experience, if you feel like that's your calling, by all means go for it. If you don't have any tangible work experience, I highly recommend go do 2 or 3 years outside of pharmacy school and consulting. If you like it, get your MBA. If you don't like it, you can go and pivot to do something else, right? The MBA is you don't need it to get into consulting. Like any other degree, does it supplement in certain other areas? Absolutely. But is it a prerequisite? Not at all. I think it would be a better use of people's time if they graduated, go and do consulting for a couple of years. If you really like it, now go do an MBA. You have tangible experience you can actually call upon when you're in those MBA classrooms, because a lot of those classrooms, they're student run. The professor is there as a facilitator. Most of those, and that's why for me, I got so much more out of the business school than I did in my pharmacy school class. My pharmacy school classes, everything they taught me, I can look up on UpToDate. I can look up on micromedics. I know most of that stuff is factual information that was repeated back to me. Whereas in business school, you don't get those kind of interactions in a book, right? You don't get what it's like for a 27, 28-year-old to manage, a team of 40 people at a Fortune 50 healthcare company. Like those kind of experiences, those kind of things you can draw on, but from people's past experiences, that's what you're paying for in business school.
So if I can summarize what you said, you can, a PharmD who is interested in consulting doesn't need to go get an MBA first. And in fact, going for an MBA without prior work experience is not necessarily the best way to maximize the MBA, because the MBA curriculum depends a lot on your work experience. So you don't have to go the MBA route to get into consulting. But if you come as a PharmD, then you're probably going to spend the first couple years at the analyst or consultant level, and you pick up the skills.
Absolutely. And most PharmDs will start at the consultant level or equivalent at other firms. It's rare that you'll see a PharmD come in as a pure analyst. Analysts are usually people who come out straight from undergrad. So it's rare that you'll find PharmDs who come in at that level.
Very good. So my last question, thank you. This has been very, very insightful. My last question to you is, what are the lessons you've picked up along the way? I know you've shared a number of insights, but any additional lessons you've picked up along the way that you would like to share?
Absolutely. And I'll start, I'll group this in with current pharmacy students as well as current pharmacists. I don't care how long you've been in an industry or a profession or school for that matter. Knowledge is never final, right? You should always be inquisitive, always ask questions, always challenge yourself to know or learn more, and never become complacent. I think on top of that, I'd add on, it's so much more valuable to say I tried and failed than to not even try at all because of fear of the unknown or fear of failure.
Excellent. So no matter whether you are young and a recent graduate or you've been practicing for a long time, there's always growth, opportunity for everyone, and let's not get complacent. Patrick, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience with us. I am sure that a lot of people will benefit from the insights you've shared. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, not a problem. Happy to be on, happy to assist.
Best wishes and keep me posted. I'll be tracking you on LinkedIn and through Hatu and cheering you on through what I'm sure is going to be a continued successful career in consulting and even beyond.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you for taking time to listen to this episode of RX, How I Got There. This is a podcast where we bring you stories and insights from pharmacists to help you think more broadly about your own career. Please support us by subscribing to our channel, clicking like, and sharing this with your colleagues and your friends. Until the next time, this is your host, Ebere Igboko.